Hello, everyone. Welcome to Charts Free webinar series. And today I'd like to welcome Kurt Archambault from People and Performance Strategies, who's going to be presenting on unconscious bias awareness that makes a difference. Welcome, Kurt.
Hey, Tara, thank you so much. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thanks everybody who has joined us today. Very excited to have you on this webinar. Hey, Tara, real quick before you leave us, not that you're officially leaving, will the attendees be able to chat and see all attendees' comments or just the panelists?
They should be able to see everyone. Everyone should be able to see each other's comments, but they are, I think they should see all of them. I think you can choose whether or not it's going to all panelists or all attendees. Is that not accurate?
It's apparently not giving folks the opportunity
Got
to
it.
select.
All right. I think I just fixed it. Sorry about that. Okay. So yes, now you should be able to chat with each other. I apologize about that.
Awesome. Awesome. I love when something works out so quickly like that. Thank you, Tara. Appreciate it. Well, now that we've got that solved, I'm feeling even better about myself. So thank you very much again for joining us. We're happy to have you here. And why that feature was so important is we're going to kind of launch into some opportunities to share some thoughts as I share a few images with you. So what I'm going to do is share an image. And I would like you to type in 1 or 2 words that pop into your head as you see that image. Just put it in the chat. It's going to go lightning fast as this happens. So try to catch as many of the thoughts as you can. I'll be keeping an eye on it, and we'll talk a little bit about it. So a series of images are going to come up. I'll set it there for a second or two. Type in your first thought that pops in your head, and then we'll move on to the next image. So here we go. First image is this wonderful item. Type in chat. What's the first thing that comes up? Look at that. Fast, luxurious, expensive, fancy, sleek, wow, rich. Yep, cool. So a lot of commonalities. Wrong color. Very nice. I love that. Not for me, interestingly enough. Fast. All right. Here's the next image. I love jeans on the last one. Hard to get into. I agree with that. Okay, dependable, grocery, local, mom car, mountains, conservative, convenient, boring, mine, you actually own that one, nice, stable, safe, normal, some interesting things that come up there, somewhat different than our previous picture, dependable, practical, again, some folks that have things in common, some that have some different viewpoints. How about this slide? Might be too soon for some of you, especially those of you in Texas who had to weather this difficult time. Heck no, cold, Midwest, just yesterday, that's funny. Burr, couple of months ago, very cold, Minnesota. Do you like that little Minnesota accent I put in there? Oofda, yeah, very nice, Braxton, yes. Lots of money, yes. And then we have this image. What pops in your head here? Spring, Napa, oh, I love that. So associated, the Broadmoor, relaxing, serenity, beautiful. We all seem to be fairly consistent here. Saturdays, being home on a nice walk, feeling very serene. That's amazing. All right, so there's a lot of coming out. Need some leaves. I agree with you on that one. And how about this image? People are thinking about busy, busy, busy city. Some have fun. Favorite city, huge. Busy, vacation, yes, too populated, meh. My hometown, New York City, so lots of things. Calgon, take me away, I can't get out soon enough. I'm not sure where the marijuana comes in, but I'll go with it. Paul got married there, very cool. So there's some interesting recognition there and some correlation. And then we have this image. What do you think there? Quiet, charming, old town, small town, comforting, Main Street, yes, a little dead, history, sheltered, slower pace, quaint, where my grandparents live, that's awesome. Road trip, where are we gonna go next? Pandemic, where'd everybody go? Looks like where I currently live, that's awesome. Antiques, yeah, interesting. Again, some commonalities and some different perspectives. I think you'll enjoy this next one quite a bit. What first comes to your mind when you see this? Funny, love her, hilarious, cool. Also a white, all right. Golden, awesome. Golden Girls, genuine, a queen. Love the Golden Girls, a legend, yes. She does have a potty mouth, which is interesting. And I do like the Snickers commercial, right? Are you acting like Betty White? Please stay alive, I agree. Funny, hilarious. And then the last one in the series, this one. What comes to mind here? I know the holidays are over. You think about your kids, good, a little creepy, a little grumpy. Yes, Jim Carrey. Misunderstood, interesting, not my cup of tea, a little grouchy. Green comes to mind, weird. Cindy Lou Who, very nice. Not my favorite, me sometimes. So it's interesting, and continue to put in your thoughts there. But as you think about this, and we have these images pop up, outside of maybe Betty White, where we all can kind of agree, potentially the sunny day, where we tend to all agree, there was a myriad of thoughts and responses. I think the one that was probably the most polarizing per se was the images of the vehicles, right? Some people saw the Lamborghini as cool, sleek, and fast and awesome. Others like rich, expensive, not for me. And then the flip side, the Ford, it was like comfortable, calm, and then also boring and doesn't really pertain to me or what I would be interested in. And then some said, that's my car, which is awesome. Not many folks said the Lamborghini was their car, but that's the way it is. So the point of this whole exercise was you literally, every time a picture popped up, had an instantaneous thought that popped into your head. And in some cases, some of us were in alignment. In other cases, some of us had a very diametrically opposed viewpoint of that particular image. So we wanted to use this exercise to start off our discussion around unconscious bias, which oftentimes brings up imagery in relations to the diversity, equity, and inclusion space, which is totally appropriate, where our minds should go. But we also want to kind of broaden our definition of how unconscious bias drives us and what areas it influences us. So that's going to be kind of our focus for today, is this broader view of unconscious bias. And what I hope to come to with this session is, what is it and how does it impact us? Okay, so we'll spend a good portion of our hour on that. And then we'll transition to this concept of agile organizations. This is a philosophy that was in place for a number of years that organizations are leaning towards, and then 2020 really accelerated that viewpoint and perspective. And so we're going to try to make that connection between an agile organization, EQ and emotional intelligence, and also this impact of our unconscious biases and how these three things intersect and how they can work and support each other, and then how your EQ influences your biases. And then we'll wrap it up with a little WIIFM, what's in it for me. For some of you that might want to explore this a little bit more in detail, we have an offer that we can allow you to take advantage of as a result of joining us here today. So that's our goal, that's our expectation. So let's go ahead and dive into it. When we talk about unconscious bias and how it relates to Agile EQ, we've got to start with unconscious bias. So for example, what is it? You hear a lot about it. You hear people talk about it. You may even have gone through some training. I was just on LinkedIn yesterday looking at something, and the first thing that popped up in my feed was a LinkedIn unconscious bias training session, which, by the way, was very good if you want to get some more information. But unconscious bias is those thoughts or feelings that are rooted in your preferences for or against something. And we'll talk about that a little bit. And it can lead to favorable or unfavorable responses. And it's something that affects all of us. You're having it right now. As you're listening to me speak to you, there are things that are popping into your head about what you are liking about the presentation so far, what you're not liking about the presentation so far. So it's around us and impacts us at every moment of our life. And why is that? Well, where'd it come from? Interestingly enough, as I do more and more research on this, and for those of you who have kids, we are influencing our kids with their biases. We were influenced by our parents. So our age, our gender, personality, education, our ethnicity, what part of the country we grew up in, all of these things have an impact on where our unconscious biases stem from. Our life's experiences, and as I mentioned earlier, shape our preferences for or against. So I'm going to give you a very quick example for me of some unconscious bias that has been shaped for many years with my upbringing. So I'm going to show you an image. If you have a response to the image, you can go ahead and type it into the chat, and I will tell you, this image invokes a response in me. Okay, when I see this logo, I have a response. And that comes from years and years of, really being engaged with this logo in many, many cases. And I can see individuals are responding appropriately. And I'm not going to tell you which way I'm responding to this image. You'll figure it out in the not too distant future. But I can't tell you how many conversations I've had about this logo and the people that are related to this logo. Now, over the course of time, I also was exposed to this logo. And I have a visceral reaction to it as well. And it's one that has been part of my life for years. Yes, Vicki, I knew that would be exciting to you. This has been a big impact on my life, so much so that it also impacts my children's life. So by now, you may have been able to figure out that I tend to, and I think it was I don't know what it was, but the logo is a little bit bigger than the other one. I'm a huge Michigan fan. Okay, have been a Michigan fan for all my life. And when I see the Ohio State logo, I have a response. And I will tell you, it's not the most positive response. Now, I am very friendly with all my Ohio State fans, but it is amazing that how this bias has influenced my interactions over the years. And so, matter of fact, so much so I am on a couple of Facebook groups that are what we would say anti-Ohio State friendly. But that bias is so huge. And this is a friendly bias, right? But it isn't always that way. Sporting events can become a very opposing experience amongst fans. But there are fans that look at it as it's just a game and we can move forward. And there are others, they don't like Michigan folks, and Michigan folks don't like Ohio State folks. It's just the way of the world. But that is one simple, easy example of how our biases influence our decisions and lead us towards favorable, unfavorable responses. When I meet somebody who's a Michigan fan or is wearing Michigan apparel, I say something positively. When I see somebody wearing an Ohio State apparel, I just quietly say things to myself. But that influences my interaction with them. They're still lovely people. I have lots of great friends that are Ohio State fans. So one simple example, but it comes from years of conditioning. And I have to step back and say, what is it that's led me down this path? Now, unconscious bias, as you know, is helpful in cases, but can also be harmful. And the reason we have these is it's kind of from our beginnings, the fight or flight concept. We get so much data, and it's so much more data today. What does it say? 11 million pieces of information hit us at any point in time, but our conscious brain can only process around 40 bits of information, which is surprising. But it doesn't mean that other 11 million isn't getting put in there somewhere. And so we do have to make decisions. So if I'm walking in a situation, my unconscious bias is kicking in if that situation is perceived as scary or unsafe, and I have to make a quick decision. That's when it's used in its maybe most appropriate situation, right? But if my bias is leading me to make a choice about something that is inaccurate, I may be making a choice or a decision that is not fully informed. So we really have to work at this, and there's no one shortcut to effectively using your biases in the most productive way. This is an ongoing process, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So as you think about this, I'm getting inundated with information in today's day and age where social media and marketing and television and all other ways that we absorb information is coming in our natural surroundings. One brief example with the additional technology that are putting in cars, I'm getting so much data points when I drive my car. My Fitbit or fitness tracker, I'm getting so much information. And yes, I have a sleep number bit. I'm getting so much information that's inputted into my unconscious bias that's leading me to make decisions that affect me and others around me. And so I have to be very, very deliberate about what I'm doing and how I'm choosing to do it based on that information. And so that's where we want to get a little bit deeper into unconscious bias. Now, when does it occur? Well, you guys have all experienced this, right? The visceral responses that you had to the images, very quick, immediate responses, triggered by your brain. We make judgments and we have opinions. For us in the hospitality world, we're faced with challenges with a I can't think of the word now, all of a sudden it escapes me, multi-generational workforce, right? And comes certain biases towards different workforces or ages of the workforce. We're in situations that we have to make quick decisions, right? Many of you are working out in the field, interacting with customers, and there's a lot of complexity that has been added to our world in regards to customer service and how do we respond and how do we handle that particular moment. But our brain kicks in. And again, your preferences are going to drive those responses. And that's what we want to talk about is, are those preferences that are driving your responses the most appropriate in the situation? So we'll talk more about that in just a moment. Now, when do they kick in a lot? Well, when you're under pressure, right? Think about your times where you've been most under pressure. You almost go into autopilot, right? Many people have talked about that. Some of you are the type that love to multitask, or you're in a hurry, so you make lots of snap decisions. That's that unconscious bias just helping you get through the day. Because we don't always have the time to just sit back and ruminate about something for hours and hours. We have to make a decision in the heat of the moment. But what we hope to do is build the skill that within that time frame that we have, we can assess multiple perspectives and make sure we're not allowing a bias to impact us negatively, that we're appropriately applying, our thoughts and processes to the situation. But really think about that moment when you're in the heat of the moment. That's when your biases, your unconscious biases, may come out in the strongest format. And we'll give you some tools to help you with that. So here's a fun fact. I don't know how many people know this, but there was a time when QR codes were like this thing, and then they went away because nobody got them. And now it's a thing, right? Where you got menus that we have to access touch-free. So if you have your smartphone handy, as I do, and you go into the camera, you should be able to take a picture of this QR code. And Tara has so quickly placed it in the chat if you don't have the opportunity to have your phone handy. But it might be helpful for you to pull up this image. It's an infographic, and I'm a huge fan of infographics, but it would have been so tiny on the screen, you wouldn't be able to see it. But this is a graphic from Virtual Capitalist, which basically highlights 50 biases. And what I love about it, and we're going to use this to talk a little bit about our unconscious bias, is they've also broken it down into kind of subgroups. So you can see, for those of you who have it or have it up on your screen, they have little tabs that identify where these are associated with, whether it's memory, social, learning, belief, money, or politics. And 50 is a lot. And I can tell you, as I go through this list, and I would love you to kind of scan through this list and just kind of start making a mental note as you look through some of these, of maybe some of the biases that you have experienced personally, or biases that you personally have that have impacted others around you or yourself. So, an easy one is towards the middle of the page, a stereotyping. Right? We've all heard of stereotyping. We adopt generalized beliefs that members of a group will have certain characteristics despite not having information about the individual. Just to see how this works, when we think about our work world, is there any how would you say stereotyping has impacted you in your workplace? Is there anything that comes to mind to anybody on this webinar where stereotyping has been an issue, and in what way? Oh, look at that, Sarah. Women are better housekeepers. Women are too emotional. Okay, yeah. Do we have any millennials on the webinar? Are you sick and tired of hearing that terminology? Women can't be chefs, crazy. Entitlement, you're too young. Old people can't work in kitchens. Women are bad drivers. Yeah, I have a client that's in the produce industry, and that's a big issue. It's like we can have drivers that are female. They know how to drive vehicles, but we have this bias that says, no, let's just look at a certain audience. Oh, here's one. Listen, young lady, interesting. You're taking on too much. QSR is only for unskilled workers. Excellent, Suzanne. I appreciate you putting that up there. Assume I grew up wealthy. Amazing. Yeah. So there's a lot of biases. Whether, I'm moving into my, what I would like to say, senior years, right? I'm over 50. Yes, I'm a proud card-carrying member of AARP. I want to call out Carmela's one there. Is that your real hair? Very, just amazing things that our biases allow us to speak out loud. It's crazy. But I experience ageism at times. Thanks, Brock. I appreciate that. And so, we understand that this stereotyping, it's easy for us to stereotype and put people in buckets because it allows us to move through quickly, right? As opposed to taking a moment to listen and learn about that individual and what they bring to the table. So it's very important that we don't allow these things and we step back from these things. Let's see, what's another one I would love to get some insights on? I know I have a couple that I'll bring up later. You know, the Ohio State, Michigan, in-group favoritism. We favor people who are in our in-group as opposed to people that are out-group. Well, I can tell you, I favor people that are Michigan fans, and I may not favor people that are Ohio State fans until I get to know them. And then I realize I have a lot of really cool friends that are Ohio State fans or fans. We also hire people who are in our group. Very good, Sarah. Yes, I would notice in my past life when I worked in quick service, and somebody put this in the chat earlier, we tend to hire people that look like us. You know, so our Caucasian managers had a very strong Caucasian workforce. Our African-American managers have an African-American workforce. And not to say, you know, we just have to look at, is that what's leading to that? What is there a bias that's driving that? So I appreciate that. I am a big laundry guy. I love doing laundry. And so, but maybe that's driven us to make poor choices when we hire, when we think men can't do laundry or women are only good housekeepers. So lots of interesting bias. What's another one that I have? And then we'll kind of move forward here. There's so many to look at. Oh, interestingly, one, this is not necessarily considered a bias, but it's one that has come up a lot recently, the bystander effect. That the more other people are around, the less likely we are to help a victim. And we've seen that happen quite a bit. And so, you know, if I'm observing a crime, but I assume that there's other people observing the crime, I'm less likely to report the crime because I'm assuming somebody else is going to do it. When we think about that in the workforce, if we see a coworker stealing from our business and we just assume, well, there's other people that are watching this, so somebody else is going to do it. Again, it's not quite a bias, but it's something that informs our choices and our decisions. And so we have to be very, very aware of these things. And I do reflect on the issues that are happening in our Asian community as it relates to this as well. So hopefully you have this tool available to you. I would highly encourage you to, you know, it is a bit of an eye chart to print out, so you have to get the right size paper, but it's very convenient to have this and very good to have a tool like this as you are navigating the world. So we'll touch base on some more of these, but I want you to think about how these biases might impact the choices that we make. Carmelia, I'm hoping I'm not looking so angry, or is that just a general comment? Just checking. So keep in mind that this unconscious mind of ours is so powerful, and it makes us do things. And I don't know how many of you have gotten into a discussion, animated an argument with another coworker, and it's almost like you're having an out-of-body experience, that you know what you're saying and doing isn't appropriate, but you just somehow can't stop yourself. That's the power of this unconscious mind, and we have to really step back. Now, the good news is we can still go back and apologize. We can still go back and have an opportunity to correct what we may have said or done that was fueled by our unconscious bias. But it takes time and energy to really open up our perspectives and make sure that we are thinking things through. And why is this important? Well, because the world is moving at such a fast pace, it's giving us less and less time to think. So that's where this concept of agility kicks in. You're going to hear a lot about this in organizations, right? We need to move faster, 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 faster. But the faster we move, the more risk the unconscious bias can come into the workplace. You know, if you have and I know this is happening in the hospitality world, you know, as we look to ramp up and kind of respond to the opening up of the economy, we have to fill open positions, and it's getting harder and harder to fill open positions. And we may make choices one way or the other because of that pressure to fill positions that may be fueled by an unconscious bias one way or the other. So recognize that speed, as somebody said way back in the day, speed kills, but we do have to kind of step back and think about things before we move forward. But agility is a topic. So what does that mean? Well, why are we needing to be agile? Because we are in an ultimately competitive world. Everybody that's on this webinar that's in the hospitality industry knows that it's super competitive, and you have to stay ahead of the game, whether it's with technology, whether it's with your team, you know, staying ahead of the curve with your customers. We have to stay on our game, and we have to be quick. Now, just as a sidebar, I would venture to guess that the one thing that the pandemic in 2020, especially for hospitality and hotel and restaurants, is you have amped up the speed of things as a result of the pandemic. Stuff that may have taken 6 to 7 months to work through, you've been able to pull off in 6 to 7 days. And people have moved forward very quickly. That's great. And we want to make sure that that is the case, but we also want to make sure we're not making things too quickly that we then make some larger, bigger mistakes. So we can talk about that in a second. I was introduced to this terminology not too long ago by a close friend, actually a chart member, this VUCA world that we live in. And it took me a little while. I actually had to Google, what the heck is VUCA? And then it came up, this volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. That was an issue prior to the pandemic. The pandemic just accelerated this concept, which then fuels the need for a more agile workforce and an agile organization. But again, we have to temper that speed with thought and making sure we're thinking things through and balancing those two out. According to some research we did, an organization that we work with, 90% of organizations said agility is more important to their success now than 5 years ago. And this was done a little bit prior to the pandemic. I don't know if this number would go up or go down if we surveyed these individuals. And we said that 95% of leaders said agility is more important to their organization's success than was 5 years ago. So we know that agility is critical. It's a critical competency that we need to have in our organization, but it's one that we have to couple with some other tools and skill sets to ensure that we minimize the negative impacts and the less favorable responses that our biases might have in individuals, and there's biases in an organization. We all know that we have systems and processes. Just quick question to the group. What would be one system or process that you've experienced that you have in place in your organization that could be negatively impacted by unconscious bias? Go ahead and type in there. Candidate screening, very good, yes. The selection process is fraught with challenges, and the hiring and interview process, making promotions, yes, who gets to move forward. These, if you want to start somewhere, this is a great place to start looking at, unconscious biases, that chart that we gave you, and where do they fall? Listen for that in the interview process. Look at that in your selection process. And then also think about it as it relates to the use of applicant tracking systems. Are there certain biases built into your applicant tracking system? We have to take a look at those things to see how they're fueling our ability to find the people we need to operate in our business. But those are all great ones. When it comes to people development, selection through promotion, these systems have to be looked at. We need to keep them agile, but in a way that we get the best candidates for the role, and we are not eliminating some candidates because of certain biases that we've put in place. The question came up, what does the C and A stand for? I'll just go back to that real quick. So C is complexity and A is ambiguity. So VUCA. And yes, I will be doing a PDF of this PowerPoint. You can email me. I'll give you my email address at the end if you would like to have it before we go. So we know that people are the critical component. We can address our systems. And again, all the things that you guys talked about where biases can come in play, you can have the best system, but then you got to have it utilized by people. And so you may have taken out some of the biases in your systems, but then people have to execute on that. And we have to make sure that their biases do not then come back in and impact the system that you tried hard to build out. One of the famous ones that you can go on and look and see the impact of biases in the hiring process is there's a great video out there. Google it. It's around the Philharmonic Symphonies and how many conductors felt that only men made good musicians. And that was eliminating a lot of very talented female musicians. And so one group decided that they were going to make their choices by having the musician step behind, yes, until they did blind auditions, exactly. Step behind a screen so nobody can see who is doing, and just listen to the music in and of itself. And amazingly enough, how many of the conductors were selecting more female musicians as a result. So thanks, Angie, for sharing that. So why is this so important? There's a psychology behind it, right? We've got disruption, shifting organization, evolving challenge. Everything is changing. Everything we knew has changed. We have different ways of communicating, but we need to communicate as efficiently as possible. We need to push back against resistance, but we also need to push back against biases. And so we need a new skill set to help us. And what that will lead to is helping us resolve issues, hopefully be more open and receptive to ideas, and willing to take risks that, maybe our biases would not allow us to do. Or maybe our biases would push us down a road that was too risky, but really kind of balancing those. Our organizations continue to shift. What is the terminology? We have matrix organizations being set up, shared power structures, very ambiguous boundaries. I just saw a report this morning that our local large employer, Amazon, is not going to do a hybrid work environment as we come to know it, but bring people back into the office-centered environment. So it's, what does that mean? And how are people going to respond? What is your belief about that coworker who wants to come up and shake your hand? And then what do they think about you when you resist shaking their hand back in the workplace? Very challenged, and you may not have a direct reporting relationship that's a peer, lots of things that go on. But what we hope to get out of that is, we reach out to others. We take a more diplomatic perspective, but we remain assertive and moving forward, right? And so you have that balance between speed and well thought out ideas. And then who we bringing on board? There's so many things influencing us, the different generations. Yes, the vaccination issue is going to come up. Knowledge, education, ethnicity, class, personality. There's so many things that influence the team, and we get very, very focused on certain groups or styles. You know what? We all can be quality team members in different areas, and we don't need to be put into buckets, so to speak. So what do we hope to get out of this for our staff? Well, we look at things like empathy, very difficult for some of us. I can tell you myself personally, I'll talk a little bit about that. Objectivity, or can we be self-assured? And it all is rooted in who we are, okay? And so that's where we then transition our learning to making it a little bit more personal. We start with the individual in mind. So go ahead, slide. So to build an agile organization, we have to build emotional intelligence. How many of you, just a quick thumbs up or whatever, are have started or have been doing emotional intelligence training within your organizations? It's been a hot topic. A lot of people are raising their hands. It's probably, if it isn't the top 3 in training and development topics out there, it's a close 4th. So there's a lot of organizations that are investing time and energy in emotional intelligence, and then we tie it back to the agile organization, and then we really want to show how it influences our biases. So, our goal is, many leaders agree that developing emotional intelligence is crucial to building an agile workforce. I think that goes without saying and reinforces the statistics that we had earlier on. So then what does that mean in relations to unconscious bias? Well, we want to help people better understand their interpersonal and emotionally charged situations. How do they handle those? What is at the core of that? And I'm going to dip into an area. We've got 20 minutes left on this call. We don't have enough time to talk about this, but if you want to see how people handle situations from an unconscious bias standpoint, just get on Facebook for like 5 minutes and you'll see it in its full glory, especially around a very difficult subject matter. It gets very emotionally charged. People have unfriended friends, lifetime friends, based on interactions that have been having on Facebook. So what we want to try to help people with is recognize how your mindsets influence how your agility, your emotional intelligence and unconscious bias, how these are all interwoven together, okay? So there is no independence. And then in organizations, we want to make sure that we have that emotional intelligence, that I can read other people, right? Jean, you just taught it, or Jeannie, you just taught it this morning, right? It's all about picking up on those unspoken cues. What are you seeing in those other folks? What are you feeling in yourself, and how are you responding in that moment? That's all part of the emotional intelligence concept. So where does Agile EQ kick in? Well, it starts with you, right? It's got to begin with, I can't expect somebody to do something without me understanding the impact of my biases my EQ, and my mindset. So that's where we're going to kind of talk a little bit about. Now, many of you on this call are familiar with what we do professionally as an organization at PP-Strat. You know, we use an assessment called DISC, and that helps give us an insight into who we are. Right. I just want to kind of balance this out and say that a tool such as DISC or other behavioral assessments are not designed to increase biases, right? There is a HBO documentary out right now that talks about personality assessments. And if you watch it, I want you to do it through the lens of saying it's not the assessment that is at issue, it's how it's being utilized. So when I get my DISC style, that is not to be used as a way to stereotype me. Right? It's to help me understand me and to help you understand me. But I can stretch and flex from that. This is my kind of my default style. It helps us develop our EQ, because once I have an insight and awareness to who I am then allowed to, or given the opportunity, which is a choice that I have to make, of how easy or difficult it's going to be for me to develop EQ in various different areas. And then ultimately, you know, we believe we have a very good tool. So we'll talk a little bit about that at the end. Now, back to the biases. So just to kind of give you a little insight, I've taken my DISC and I'm a CD style. So I'm conscientious dominance. I lead with conscientiousness, but I also want to get things done. Okay, so I'm a rule follower. I have a system and a process, step by step, and one that by doing it step by step, I can get things accomplished quickly. Now, that being said, I am also by nature questioning and skeptical. If you say something is X, I am going to say, tell me more. I don't believe you. I wonder why. Okay. My pessimism comes in. So I tend to overestimate the likelihood of a negative outcome. So I'm the guy at the meeting telling you why it may not work. Okay. Now I hopefully have grown and I'm presenting it in a way that is helping us make a broader decision. But I can tell you, in personal situations, discussions with family and friends, sometimes the darker side of this bias comes out. And so it is, for me, a defense mechanism against disappointment. One of my life's mantras is undercommit and overdeliver. That's all rooted in my bias around pessimism. I just don't want to let anybody down. But what happens is that can come out in a very negative way to my coworkers, my colleagues, my employees, my boss, my spouse, my children, right? And when I read this, I really reflected back on, you know, the worst aspect of pessimism is that even if something good happens, you probably feel pessimistic about it anyway. And I'm like, okay, could you take a frying pan to my forehead on that one? That's exactly, I can't tell you how many experiences I've had about that. Same thing, okay? So that's how those two fuel each other. So I start questioning and skeptical, and then it drives my pessimism bias. There is an opposite of the pessimism bias, and you know what it is? Optimism bias. Well, guess I live with an individual who has optimism bias, and her DISC style just so happens to be influencing, and she's an IS, and so she's kind of shoot for the stars and shoot for the moon, and at least you'll hit the stars. And I'm like, I don't even understand what that is. But she always thinks something, oh, steadiness. Thank you, Kim. I should know that off the top of my head. So she automatically assumes the best out of the outcome. Now, what allows us to be a great team is we can balance the two, as long as we go into it with this mutual focus of a positive outcome. But you can see that one bias can have an opposite bias, okay? So that's how they influence each other. And I'll talk about another one a little bit down the road. Many of you are probably have taught many of these programs. They're all great programs. We're not here to say any program is a bad program. Just figure out how they are going to best serve your organization. But what you want to ask is, what is your goal? What are you trying to accomplish? You know, are you trying to be descriptive with your team? What does it mean, your unconscious bias and your emotional intelligence and your communication style? Are you using it as a diagnostic tool? This is a tricky area because this is what can lead to stereotyping and pigeonholing folks, but it's to help you kind of build an awareness around yourself and others. Are you looking to make changes, whether it's with systems or with people? I can tell you one of the best things we do is having, selection tools. We have a selection tool, but one of the scariest things is we keep selecting people that fit the profile so well, we don't have a varied viewpoint. So we have to be careful how we use these tools. What are the traits that we want on our team? What are behaviors that we're looking for? What are the values that we have organizationally? There's a lot of things that these tools get at. ours as well. But basically, at the end of the day, what you really want to get at, and this is my, one of my favorite slides, is, we look at it as the ability to adapt my behaviors, right? But ultimately, it's about how can I be more agile so that I have an ability to move quickly and easily. But here's the key kicker: to be informed, right? Because fast is not always the best, but the ability to move quickly and be informed and make informed decisions and check my biases to make sure I'm not going down a path that is not productive for where we are going to move. And you'll see in that list of 50, there's so many ways your team and yourself can be impacted by your unconscious bias. So that's the crux of what we try to do. We have a tool. This is an example of our Agile EQ. It'll show where you are listed, and it'll show things that are natural to you. And it'll also give you that opportunity to kind of see where can you stretch away from your natural style. So I'll talk a little bit more about that before we get through it. But the idea is, let's start with me. I can't expect anybody to change except for myself. And then we tie it to this terminology called mindsets. What are your mindsets, and then how do they inform our bias? You heard my mindset. I tend to be questioning and skeptical by nature, which informs my bias of pessimism, easy for me to say. And so I need to step back from that and say, in this moment, am I being overly pessimistic? Is there an opportunity? Is there something I'm missing? Am I going down a rabbit hole? And is my mindset influencing that? And what can I do differently moving forward? I only get that if I know who I am. That's then fueled by the profile. We have a learning that goes with it. You're going to be able to see the profile. And then the learning experience is really broken into 3 parts. And that's to begin with, who you are, what's your style, what do you bring to the table? And that's a key point I want to make up. You have a style, and it's a strength used appropriately. If it fuels an unconscious bias that works against you or your team or your coworkers, that's when we have to take that step back and make sure it's not being applied inappropriately. Come on, click, click, click. All right. Next thing we do is we want to value and recognize others, right? Everybody on the team brings a unique perspective, and we want to value that. And learning more about them will help us unlock some of the negative aspects of our unconscious biases. There's always that overly optimistic person on the team. Why do they stick out to me? Because I'm overly pessimistic, okay? I also have a strong confirmation bias. Once I'm committed to something, because I've done the detail work, I've done the research, that's my C style kicking in, I am finding every bit of information to support my position. But am I only looking at those things that support my position? Am I broadening my view to look at alternatives to that might be against my position, so I can make a more well-rounded, informed decision? That's how my confirmation bias can be used against me. And then what's the best response? If I've done that work, if I've looked at both sides, then I can make a better choice, or at least a better informed choice, but do it so in a way that it doesn't hold us up, right? I mean, there are some folks on our teams that they research things to death and never make a decision. We can't have that either. We have to have a way to help people move forward through the process quickly. So that's where we think tapping into your EQ, your disc style, and understanding the biases that you may or may not have that are working for or against you, those 3 things combined will give you the tools necessary to move forward in a appropriate pace that's going to best serve you and the organization. So what does that look like? Well, we've got a lot of learning tools that we'll give you. I'm just going to kind of go through these quickly as we move through the balance of the conversation. You discover your mindset, help you lay the groundwork for yourself, understand yourself, and then develop that understanding of your disc style, which I talked about. And then you'll learn about those others or those mindsets that are natural to you. Again, and you'll see that if you elect to take the assessment. This is an example of the various different mindsets. And so you can see like my DC style, I can tell you the 3 mindsets that are most natural for me are self-assured, resolute. Yes, I'm what's the saying that my granddaughter, who is 12, by the way, it's like dog on a bone. Once I got an idea in my head, I am moving forward with that thing no matter what. And that's not always the best thing. Standing my ground in the inappropriate situations could be a negative to the team. So I have to recognize that resolute can be great, but there are times when it can be an overused strength. And then the other one is objective. I'm a very facts and figures kind of guy. I don't let emotions, for the most part, dominate my thought process. Do I need to at times? Do. Sometimes that's driven by emotion and not just by the facts. Big data is a great thing, but it's just numbers. We need to have the story behind the numbers, and that's what my colleagues on the other side might be able to help me with, but I have to be open to hearing their perspective and not being so pessimistic about what they have to say. Just giving you little insights. You'll get an example of your strengths, how they might affect others, what you need. So we break it down into each one of the sections. Here's what my strengths are. Here's my need by, for my EQ. And then this one, which is the powerful one, how I have an effect on others. This is really important information, especially as you then tie it into your biases and see how your mindsets are connected to some of your biases. So we give you kind of a general overview. So that's just a quick example of the learning. Again, step 2 would be, how do your biases impact you? So another one that I have is anchoring, right? Like I make a quick judgment. I'm judgy. Okay, I apologize. I'm sorry. And for those of you that are judgy like me, you know that it doesn't work always, and it's really a negative for you if you don't apply it appropriately. So the first thing you judge influences your judgment, all that follows. Some people think this is a little bit like confirmation bias, but our minds are associative in nature. So the order in which we receive information helps us determine the course of judgments and perceptions. Be especially mindful of biases during this negotiation. So in my world, being a CD style, yeah, I'm resolute. I'm sticking to my guns. I'm staying with the plan. And unfortunately, what that leads to is not listening and hearing what the other person has to say. How many of you have been in a meeting where you've sat around the table with other coworkers and you have 2 coworkers arguing about something, and you don't have any influence on this? You're just part of the meeting. And as you listen to them argue, you realize they're actually saying the same thing. Has anybody ever had that experience? Happens so frequently in the workplace. And that's an example of that anchoring. They're so committed to their side of the discussion that they don't even realize in the moment that they're saying the same thing. That if they put energy towards a solution and the problem, they may find that they're a lot closer to a solution based on what they're each saying to each other. It's phenomenal how that works. So again, showing you how those biases can come into play as it relates to your mindset. So for me, understanding the value of other mindsets and how I need to stretch towards them, depending upon what the situation is and when the situation calls for it. And then lastly, and this is the one, is ACT, right? I mean, everybody on here is probably of an HR training, learning and development component. We love doing classes, but there's nothing more frustrating to us than a class where people don't actually do anything with it. You have to act upon this information. So what does that look like? Well, easily enough, just understand the difficulties, your biases, and try to stretch to new mindsets. Anticipate what might happen. Think about that other person you're interacting with. What is their style? Where are they coming from? And you can do that. You'll start to learn about those folks. Look back at your past interactions with them. Compare it to the bias graphic that I sent you. If you happen to know your DISC style, see what theirs might be, and you might see some commonalities, like, oh, now I can connect the dots. What can I do differently? And we encourage people to do an action plan, but just start taking action on it. And the easiest thing for the purpose of this webinar is really recognize I got to know me. I got to know others on my team bring value, but look at the world different than I am. And then I have a responsibility to act. And what can you do? Well, there's so many tools. I mean, Google is a great thing. And what was amazing is as I was doing this webinar, I said something about Google and then my phone searched for it automatically. So I don't even have to think, and I'm getting data delivered to me without even talking, or with talking, but not really taking action. So it's crazy. Some of you may have seen this out there. It's been fairly popular. There's an implicit bias test that you can take from Harvard. Very quick. They collect your name, but it's not anything that you'll get spammed on. And there's a number of different tests that you can take. This one is specifically to people of color that you can go into. We have our Agile EQ assessment is an opportunity for you to help build awareness around your mindsets, and then couple that with the graphic that I shared with you to see how that connects to your biases. In a business setting, once you start, those of you especially that have done EQ, but anything, once you've learned something and people are exhibiting the behaviors that we want, or the behaviors we don't want, let's have that conversation, not in an accusatory way, but call it out and help people grow. It's a tricky area, so you have to kind of use your judgment on this. But when it happens, especially if people are doing it the way it's beneficial, call it out, because that's what we want to highlight. Collect data. Use the tools that you have, your systems. Are we seeing our use of data working for us, or is it working against us? How are we using that data to eliminate some biases, or effectively use the biases in a productive manner? Think about your own biases and anticipate them ahead of time. We know that there's certain coworkers that we have a visceral response. If I put a picture of a coworker up, you're going to have a response that, oh, they're wonderful to work with. Oh my God, I can't stand meeting this guy in a meeting or a Zoom call. So anticipate that moment and then step back and understand, why is that happening and what can I do differently? And then build empathy by getting to know your team members a little bit more on a deeper level, right? And I know we're in the hospitality world. We love team building. We love getting to know people. It's what we do. So it should be an easy way for you to kind of get a better understanding, learn about people's backgrounds, what might be driving their biases, what are their learned and lived experiences that is getting them to this place. That's going to help us, minimize the negative impact of our biases. Go to places that you normally wouldn't go and hang out with people you normally wouldn't hang out with. That's one of the best things you can do, and get to learn about others. Many of you on this call travel a lot. That's the best way that I've learned to appreciate other individuals, is to be in their world, and not the ugly American traveler, but absorb yourself in the environment that they live and understand what they do. Many of you volunteer and you get to experience that. So all those things will help you take some action and start building that bigger awareness around biases that you may have and how you can address them. In addition, and I'm going to go ahead and have some questions at the end. So if you have any questions that you're thinking about, feel free to type them in the chat. I'll do my best to answer them. I'm going to leave this screen up for a little while, but we do have, as you saw in the notice for this webinar, the opportunity, if you would so desire, about a 30-minute or so assessment. The easiest thing for you to do if you are interested in taking this assessment is open up an email, start a new email, go to my email address in the Kurt@ppstrat.com. And here's one that fuels my CD style. In the subject space, you could just type in "send me an Agile EQ assessment" and then put EOM around it. That's all you need to do. You're done. You're moving on. That's my CD style in action. EOM stands for end of message. Now, if you'd like to give me some feedback, which I'm always open to, about how this webinar was for you, any thoughts, questions that you have specifically that you didn't want to ask on the chat, go ahead and put that in the body. But if you just want to get an assessment code for the assessment, that's all you need to do. Step 1, step 2, step 3, and I will get that out to you. Depending on how many people we have 70 on the call, within 24 hours, you should get an assessment code. The assessment is good for 10 days, so you do have a clock. And it may show up in your spam folder. So just give me time. If you don't see an email from me within 24 hours and you looked in spam, go ahead and send me an email and I'll resend it to you. Okay. So I'm going to open it up. I don't know if anybody has any questions in the chat. I don't know what I did with my chat window. I need to open that back up. There's a question there. I'll leave this slide up for a little while. Oh, any quick tips on how to build effective SMART goals around building soft skills? I don't necessarily know if I have a quick tip. I think anytime that we're building SMART goals, one of the things that might be handy is if you have a assessment that you or your organization has used, to go back and look at that and make sure that as you're writing your SMART goal, you look at your style, but also, pull up this biases list and see if your SMART goal is being influenced by one of your biases, as you're building those soft skills, whether it's, and I'm assuming soft skills, you're talking about, interpersonal relationships with coworkers, communication with others, the ability to coach, things along those lines, written or verbal communication. Again, your biases can influence a lot of things. Written communication is one of them. And the filter with which you process somebody else's email is very influential with how you will respond to that individual's email. I hope that makes sense, Kim. That was a pretty broad response, but I think it's a multi-layered, look at a couple of different tools to help you as you start crafting those SMART goals. What else? Anybody else have any questions, comments? Thanks, Braxton. I appreciate it. All right. Well, I will, if you do have any questions that you want to ask, again, go ahead and just send them to me via email. I'll be happy to respond to you and get back to you. Kind of leave you with this last thought here as you sign off today. Deconstructing our unconscious bias takes consistent work. That's the point I wanted to really leave you with. This isn't a one webinar thing and you got it. This is constant, ongoing. It's not a one and done. You got to constantly look at it and know that you have unwanted, deep-rooted beliefs that could have a huge influence on us, and then our actions will match our intention. So once we recognize those things, take those into consideration, then what we do will match what we intended to do. So with that, I will say thank you so much for all of your attendance. Appreciate you, and I'll turn it back over to Tara for any final thoughts.
Okay, thank you so much, Kurt. That was excellent. I appreciate it. I'm so glad we kept it under an hour. Everyone else, as you're logging off, just remember that this will be available on our website within 24 hours. You can share it with anyone you want. And we will be sending you an evaluation so you can rate Kurt and tell us exactly what you thought of him. Hope to see you on the next webinar. Again, Kurt, thanks so much.
Thank you. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.